Hey, hey, hey. It's Av from the Out of This World story from our space. A story of redemption after a failed reconciliation. Hello, everyone. I've been lurking around for a few weeks and have engaged with enough posts to feel that it is time for a formal introduction. My story happened close to 30 years ago. I'm currently 61. This happened in my late 20s, early 30s. Back then, I married my college sweetheart. What always attracted me to her was how I perceived her as a strong and independent woman. The icing on the cake was that she also was what you could call a Caribbean beauty. We married, and 4 days later, we relocated to the east coast of the USA to begin new jobs, me as an engineer and she as a chemist. I would say that the first 4 years of our marriage were, if not idyllic, at least happier than the average marriage. Since we had no family and friends close, we spent a lot of time with each other, and we had some great times together. Our trouble started when we decided to purchase a townhouse, and I thought that the next logical step in our relationship was to start a family. To my surprise, when I proposed this idea, it threw our relationship into a deep downward spiral. After many arguments, my ex confessed that it was not that she did not want to have children, but that she did not want to have children with me. Ouch. She also said that having a child with me would mean tying yourself completely to me, and she did not know if she wanted to spend the rest of her life with me. After these conversations, things did not improve until one day she came and told me that she was not attracted to me anymore. I asked her if there was someone else she was attracted to, and she said yes, that she felt a great attraction for her boss. You see, unknown to me, she and her boss developed an infatuation with each other. In her job, she had to travel about 50% of the time, and he would accompany her on these trips. By the time she confessed her feeling for him, they had already developed a platonic relationship, which soon turned physical on one of these trips. When returning from this specific trip, I could see that something had changed. She was very contrite and began to talk about selling her home and moving to a smaller town in which we could just have a little house with a little garden, and we would begin new and more quiet lives. I must admit, I was like, what the F are you talking about? You've been talking about not loving me, not wanting to have children with me, and not wanting to relocate with me. She then began to tell me this long story about how her mom, who was divorced and remarried, when she was having her own marriage problems with her first husband, had taken a vacation to Mexico and had a one-week tryst with a local man. This all should have raised all sorts of alarms in my mind, as it was an almost admission that she had cheated with her boss on this most recent trip. But I was a lot younger and a lot denser in the head, so this is the obvious of this situation. After this revelation, things precipitated rapidly. She began working late, taking weekends by herself in the mountains, where later I learned her boss had a cabin, and even taking 1 week vacation by herself in order to clear her mind. Keep in mind, these were the times of no cell phones, so there was no way I could have gotten a hold of her. I still remember how crazy I was going without any communication without my wife for the whole week, without knowing where she was. All sorts of scenarios were floating in my head, except the most obvious. She is with her lover on a 1 week fun trip. Throughout all of this time, I continued to support her and paid for her individual counseling, drove her to her appointments, and even waited for her in the car. I think the individual counseling convinced her that she was being very unfair to me because she intimated that the idea of divorce came from him and not her. I still was hanging on to the hope that with the right amount of individual counseling, I was going to be able to help her sort her mind and become the wife she had been right after our wedding. It was clear she was in deep turmoil, in which sometimes she would say she loved me, and sometimes she could not stand to be in my presence. With time, I started noticing that she would try to get into arguments with me by telling me different reasons why she was not happy. She would keep on fishing for a reason which would get me upset. Once she hit in one, she would escalate the attacks until I would just leave the house searching for peace, and she could get on the phone and call her lover, based on phone records. The day she asked me for a divorce, my life crumbled. I knew we were having our troubles, but never in my wildest dream would I have thought of divorce. Here, you must understand that I came from a very Catholic culture, Hispanic, and the idea of divorce was anathema to me. Around this time, I had to take a trip to a different state for a 2-week training. When I came back, she was gone, along with one half of our furniture and one half of our savings. I had no idea where she had gone. Back then I had no one to lean on, too. There was no internet, no Reddits, no online resources or communities. I felt alone, abandoned, and fell into a deep crevice of a depression. I had basically let myself go for the previous 18 months while dealing with all the drama and stress. I had gained a lot of weight and really didn't care about my health or my appearance. I firmly believe that we look the way we feel, and back then, I looked like crap. My ex had left me with no return address and no way to contact with her. No original, no contact. while making sure to tell all of our friends that this was all my fault. So I also lost the few close friends I had. I was completely alone. Luckily, I was able to drive myself to work every day and made enough to keep the lenders away. After almost a year of feeling like crap, one morning I woke and noticed how the shadows slowly moved on the empty walls of the empty rooms of my home. It dawned on me. If I did not pull myself out of the hellhole of despair I was living in, soon I would become another shadow in the wall of an empty room. To give you an idea about how I felt back then, 5 years ago I had open heart surgery. They cut my chest open, split my sternum, and spread my ribs so that the surgeons could have access to my internal organs. After reconfiguring my organs, they wired my chest and sewed me up. I still have 11 titanium wires holding my chest. It took me 18 months to return to a semi-normal way of living. And you want to know something? I would gladly have another open heart surgery than reliving the experience of spousal betrayal and abandonment. It was brutal. It was by the grace of God that I pulled myself out of that well of despair and began to rebuild my life. I decided to completely remake myself. I had a good job and a roof over my head. I began to exercise and lost 50 pounds. Got a new wardrobe, got rid of my glasses, got eye contacts, began to run, and eventually trained for a marathon. I began to rock climb and play league volleyball. I began to live a life I could be proud of. I'm not the most good-looking guy, but I began to irradiate that aura of confidence that people noticed, and women found attractive. Soon I began to date and realized that my wife's betrayal was the best thing that happened to me because it allowed me to discover the real me. After a couple of years of living this life, I began to look for another life companion, which I found in a friend from work. We had been coworkers before my troubles began, and she had witnessed my decline and how I had slowly remade myself. She was the most beautiful woman I had ever seen in my life. The guards in my building, whom I was buddies with, could not believe that when I told them that I was dating what they knew was the babe of the building. Eventually, we fell in love and married. She quit her job and decided to stay home to focus on raising our 4 kids. This meant being a one-income family on the very expensive east coast of USA. It also meant that we could not live a life of luxury, but my wife turned out to be a great home manager and a better mom. This woman ran triathlons and learned general auto maintenance, woodworking, and general carpentry while managing a family of 6. There is no house project she is not willing to attack, and we are currently building a camper van so that we can drive across the USA when I retire this December. This winter, we will be welcoming our first grandchild. I can honestly say my wife made me discover the true meaning of a strong and independent woman. My life has been so much enriched because of her. So you see, no one knows what the future would bring. All we have to do is get our act together and trust that there are good people also seeking and willing to share their lives with us. Betrayal should not define us, especially if no reconciliation is possible. And even if R doesn't work, this doesn't mean it is the end of our roads. You might be wondering what happened to the ex. Well, a few years after she left me, I heard that within months of her abandonment, her boss divorced his wife, and they moved together and eventually got married. About 15 years ago, she called me right out of the blue. I'm still wondering how she got my number, to let me know a mutual friend had passed away. We had a short but cordial conversation. At one point, I asked her how she was doing, and she said that she was living with the consequence of her youthful mistakes, to which I answered, "It's all in the past. I don't even think about it," and hung up. I can honestly say that in my heart, I gave gratitude for her because her decisions brought me and my wife together. One last thing. Another consequence of my failed marriage and reconciliation is that for the last 15 years, I've led a ministry at my parish. I'm a Catholic permanent deacon for the divorced and separated. I have worked with literally dozens of people that were struggling with their divorces to helping them find some peace and look forward to their future with confidence. All thanks to my ex-wife's reluctance to reconcile with me. Edit. I have received a few questions, which I'll answer in an epilogue to my story. Did she ever apologize? She never even said goodbye. It was as if the years we spent together, we met in college and were best friends for a number of years before we started dating, meant nothing to her. Neither she apologized. Did you ever talk to her? We had bought a townhouse together and she was paying part of the mortgage. In order to communicate, she developed this very bizarre process of phone calls between friends so that I could get hold of her. And then she would call me if she thought communication was necessary. Since I did not change my number, she could call me at any time. We only talked a handful of times. Did you ever see her again? Between her abandonment and her final divorce, I saw her 3 times. The last one, the day our divorce became final. This was a couple of years after she abandoned me. She looked like cracked, no makeup, very hippy-dippy clothes. I, on the other hand, had lost 50 pounds and was hitting the weights pretty hard back then. In addition, because of how much weight I had lost, all my clothes were tailored, cheaper than buying new. So that day I looked sharp, with the suit and tie I was wearing. The last look she gave me when the judge was asking me if I had any objection with the divorce agreement is forever burned in my mind. Pure hatred. I guess her narcissistic brain could not comprehend how much I had thrived without her negative influence in my life. Our first reaction comes from Throwaway Glade. Half a world away, several decades out of time, and the first half of your story might as well have been me last year. This was a pleasure to read. Thanks. Next comment from Suspicious Weekend 284. Loved reading your story. I loved this. Betrayal does not define us, especially if no reconciliation is possible. And even if R doesn't work, this doesn't mean it is the end of our roads. X-Cat-Rep has the next comment. You are an inspiration to many, OP. I am just turned 60 and do not have quite as happy an ending, but I did pull myself out of that abyss and I'm living a happy, fulfilled single life. As I'm sure you found through your struggle, you honestly have to be able to be happy with and by yourself before you can find happiness with a partner. Too many people today look to the partner to make them happy. God bless you and your family and your ministry. Be well. On to the next story. Husband cheated while I was pregnant. The details. Just you're looking for some solidarity with others who have been the victims of infidelity. I'm 31 female, and my soon-to-be ex-husband, 31 male, had an emotional affair with someone much younger, 18 female, now 19, when I was pregnant. First, he said it was a super intense connection, friendship, and why should he stop talking to her? I had panic attacks at 6 months pregnant, but he refused to stop talking to her. He even snuck out to see her one night because she was crying hysterically and freaking out about losing him. I was terrified of being alone and raising our son as a single parent, so I didn't push the issue. Even though he knew I was a mess and I was losing weight and unable to sleep or go more than a few hours about crying. Then he told me that he's always wanted an open marriage, to have sex with other people, because I was the only person he had ever slept with, and he was such a physical, sexual person, and it didn't make sense that he had only ever had sex with me. We've been together for 11 years, married for 2, and he never mentioned anything like that ever, and also never told me I was the only person he had been with. I told him that didn't matter to me, but he was so ashamed. Granted, I never said no to anything he wanted to try, and we had an amazing sex life. He said that he wanted to be physical with this girl. He couldn't get it out of his head and needed to do it before our son was born. And also, that's how he wanted our relationship to be going forward. He promised he loved me and would always make me his priority, that he wouldn't fall in love with anyone else, that it was just sex. I begged him for it not to be with her, but he said that I didn't have a choice. He was going to do it regardless. And then he wouldn't be the one to end things. But if I said I wanted out, he wouldn't stand in my way. So I acquiesced. He didn't sleep with her then, but did everything but sex. I was 8 months pregnant at that point. I even considered moving forward, letting him continue to have an open marriage. We talked about ground rules and everything. I said that once a year on his birthday, I'd let him hire a really classy escort. If it was all about sex, that should be fine, no? Realizing now how little self-respect I have for myself and how wrapped up I was in being with him, how I'd do anything to keep him, but he wouldn't do anything for me. Once our son was born in July, I could feel him pulling away and confronted him again and asked him if he was in love with her, and he said yes. He was so cold and distant to me. At home, we barely spoke. But he would parade me out with friends and act like everything was fine when it wasn't, and I was dying inside. I cried every single day. He broke down too and said he was sorry and he didn't understand how this happened. But he was in love with both of us and couldn't make a decision about what he wanted. And I'm thinking, what the F? She's a child and we have a whole beautiful life together and you're willing to throw it away? It was like I meant nothing to him, like I wasn't good enough. I have never been so broken and completely traumatized. In October, we took a few weeks apart so he could figure himself out, and so I could find some peace. I moved into my parents' house with our 9-week-old son and did everything. Less than a week after I left, my husband slept with her. I found out after the fact. The day after he slept with her, he and I FaceTimed so I could virtually tour a daycare facility close to our home, and he acted like everything was totally normal. I actually felt really positive after the call because it seemed like he missed me and had rethought things. When I got back home with the baby, he barely acknowledged that he missed me. I had to ask him. It was super awkward, and that night we were intimate with each other, but I completely broke down because nothing had actually been addressed. I still didn't know who he wanted to be with or if we were going to split up. I felt so dirty and used. Only later did I find out he slept with the girl when I was gone, and then I just felt so disgusting and manipulated. A few days later, we talked about everything. This is when I found out he slept with her and made the mutual decision to divorce. Then he had a complete breakdown. saying it didn't feel right, that he didn't want to lose everything we had. So I agreed to give him one more chance. We said we'd separate for the rest of the year and then see how we felt. So I moved to my parents' little cottage in New Hampshire and have been there since. 3 days into our new separation, and I knew it wasn't going to work. We had a couples counseling session and he was still very cold and said he didn't know if he wanted to save our marriage. Then he went 6 weeks without even checking in on our son. Mid-December, we FaceTimed again and I told him I was done and he agreed. Said he still didn't know what he wanted, but that he would advocate for himself and wanted to be in our son's life. I said, "You have shown no interest. What the F?" And he said he was trying to respect my privacy and that it was so hard to reach out and talk to me when he was feeling so bad about everything. I told him to inquire about our son whenever he wanted to, and to let me tell him when I was uncomfortable or when it was too much for me. So now, we live together in New York, and it's insanely expensive to hire lawyers, so we're going to use a mediator for the divorce. What I really want is to hire the most intense lawyer possible and have a judge take everything away from him. I just don't have the money. I'm trying to get my life back on track. Ultimately, I will be moving to the greater Boston area where my parents live, so I can be close to them for support, and 3 hours away from my husband. I've been applying to jobs and looking for a place to live and daycare for my son, so I need money and can't spend it all on a lawyer. But I never want to see my husband again. I hate that he wants a relationship with our son and honestly feel like he's doing it just for the optics. He's dragging his feet and choosing a mediator, and I just want this to be over. Being a single mom is so hard. I'm exhausted and broken and just want to give up sometimes, but I know I need to keep it together for my son and work hard to make a good life for us. I've been in therapy since the beginning of this fiasco, but I'm really struggling with feelings of embarrassment, heartbreak, anger, worthlessness, etc. I've been keeping it together when my son is awake, but as soon as he's down for the night, my thoughts start spiraling and I can barely sleep. For those of you who read this far, thank you. Not really sure what I'm looking for besides some solidarity or advice from anyone willing to give it. It's so hard to stay positive when I have such a long way to go, and I'm so deep in my feelings. I'm just completely terrified of being alone for the rest of my life and not finding another partner who loves me and my son, and afraid that I'll never love someone as much as I loved my ex. I just want to be okay. Update. Hello, helpful strangers. Updating everyone on the dumpster fire that is my life. Things are still really tough. I'm in a new apartment 3 hours away with my son, have a great new job, and an amazing daycare for him. On the surface, I'm crushing it. Spend 5 minutes talking to me, and I'll bring up my situation. I just can't get over it. I'm still so depressed and struggling with very dark, intrusive thoughts of rejection, betrayal, humiliation. Feeling so unloved is the most painful thing ever. My soon-to-be ex-husband and I are in mediation, and it's going as well as can be expected. He still very much wants to be in our son's life and come to visit with his parents 1 to 2 times a month. Every time I talk to him, he cries about how much he misses our son and how much it's killing him to not see him every day and feel like a father. He's still with his teenage bride, and everyone says, "Oh, it won't last." I'm 93% positive they'll be together forever, and no word whatsoever about missing me or feeling sad that I'm not in his life anymore. It's truly like the past 11 years don't mean anything. I feel so used. I feel like a vessel he used to get a kid. Well, that's probably not the case. I just feel like crap. He cares about and loves his girlfriend so much, way more than he ever loved me, and he fought for her and chose her. He's fighting for her son and choosing him. He just never fought for me. He didn't choose me. He didn't love me. And that's what I'm struggling with the most. I know everyone says I dodged a bullet. I realize that, yes, but it doesn't make it hurt less. It's not even that I want to be back with him, because I don't. It's just hard knowing that I gave everything to someone for so long who threw it away so easily. That's what's killing me, right now. And being a single mom to a 9-month-old, dating isn't really an option right now. So I don't know how to feel better. It's coming up on 1 year since I first confronted him about everything. Mother's Day last year, when I was 6 months pregnant, and I don't really feel any better. Our first reaction comes from little bowl of fur. Sweetheart, he doesn't love anyone more than himself. His love is toxic. He didn't mind not hearing about your newborn son for 6 weeks. He didn't mind to use both of the women he claimed to love. He's still using the other girl, not fighting for her. He knows that he lost you, and that's why he's not trying to say that he loved you both. Because he wanted to have his cake and eat it too, but it was clear that you wouldn't let him. But the other girl knew he was taken and was okay with being a side piece. You weren't. That's why he didn't fight for you. You were way too smart for him to feed with lies. One more comment from Blade982. He's just never fought for me, he didn't choose me, he didn't love me, and that's why I'm struggling the most. This genuinely made me tear up. But look at what you've done. You fought for yourself. You chose yourself, and one day, you'll find someone who will choose you too. And it won't be sordid or tainted, not like your ex's great love affair. Well done on the new job and the new apartment. You're creating a new life for yourself and your son, and I hope it's soon filled with joy. Do something lovely with your son to celebrate your first Mother's Day. Start a tradition you can both honor every year.